Our truck rolls to a stop in front of the deer carcass. The doe is lying glassy-eyed, leaning up against a black iron fence on the edge of the city park. The dead animal is bloated, and the enlarged underbelly has changed from white to a slightly greenish tint. My coworker grabs the animal's legs and starts to drag the deer toward the lowered ramp on the trailer. He makes it look easy as he steadily drags the animal up into the trailer, but I know that these animals can be quite heavy. I walk to the side of the trailer where this deer joins two others, and then the smell hits me. The putrid, decaying smell of a dead animal that has been starting to decompose in the sun for several days. My gag reflex automatically kicks in, and I start dry heaving as I quickly walk away from the side of the trailer in search of fresh air. Luckily, I don't lose my breakfast, but I quickly realize that I do not have the stomach for this disgusting but necessary job. This is Wild, a Utah Division of Wildlife Resources podcast. I'm your host, Faith Heaton Jolly, and this is episode 18, Dirty Jobs. Welcome back to Wild, everybody. I am kind of finishing up a really interesting morning. I'm here with Steve Gray, and as you can probably hear and tell, we're actually driving down the highway right now. Don't worry, we're taking all the necessary safety precautions. So we're driving along, and we've just finished up some roadkill removal. So yes, I'll introduce Steve. So he is one of our wildlife technicians here with the division. And Steve, how long have you worked for DWR?
I've worked here for about 25 years.
Okay, so you're a seasoned, longtime veteran. And during that time, you've kind of have had a variety of jobs. How long have you been in this current position?
About 3 years.
About 3 years, okay. I kind of feel like after experiencing this for a couple hours today, I feel like you guys have a very underappreciated, very important job, kind of a thankless job. One of the division's dirtiest jobs, I would dare say. You guys remove dead deer.
Yes.
From roadways, from yards, wherever. So kind of talk about how often are you out picking up dead deer?
We pick them up every day, except generally on weekends we don't, but Monday through Friday we do.
Okay, so this is like, and we kind of talked about this, this is like a full-time, every day, Monday through Friday, there's a lot of dead deer.
Yes, I would say on average, and it depends on the day, we usually pick up probably between 5 and 15 deer a day, depending on the day and the time of year, on average.
That's crazy. And so, and I, just to give you guys some background, I met up with them about 9, and just in the short 2 hours I've been here, we've already picked up 3 deer, and you guys had picked up 1 before
Yes.
You met with me. Yeah. So you guys you're busy. You're hard at it all day. Well, basically, how does it work? Just kind of walk us through, how do these deer get reported to us, and kind of how that happens.
Okay, first of all, we have a spreadsheet that's on Google, so it stays updated live, and a lot of the dispatchers in the county and the UHP, they have access to that spreadsheet, and then our people at the division offices have access to it, like in the central region where I'm out of. And when they get a call from the public, they will write down the address of the deer, where it's at, the best location possible, and that's updated as soon as they write it in. It's there, and I have access to that spreadsheet to where I can see where these deer are. And these are just the ones that are being reported that the public sees.
Sure.
Sometimes these cities, the officers, they have to put down a deer. They'll put it on that spreadsheet. But we could be talking right now, and there could be another deer being put on the list right now. So
Sure, it's like continually being updated.
Yes.
So people can either call our offices directly and report it, or they'll often call police and they'll get that info over to us, essentially.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And generally, I mean, yeah, it's nice when they call our office. On weekends, obviously they usually have to call the police because our offices
closed,
are closed
right.
on weekends. So
Gotcha. So you're just kind of looking through the spreadsheet and you're grouping by geography. So we've got 5 dead deer in Salt Lake, and so you'll drive up here, pick those up, and then go to your next location, essentially.
Yeah, my area generally is all of Salt Lake County and all of Utah County. Now, we do have a gentleman that picks them up in Summit and Wasatch counties that works a couple days a week and does that. Now, if I'm not as busy up here, I can help out there or vice versa. But generally with the Salt Lake and Utah counties is where I do it. And I'll look at the list and see where they're at and try not to backtrack and try to make it a productive day by
kind of
doing it in order.
Right. And you'd also mentioned, so UDOT, the Utah Department of Transportation, they're also assisting in this effort, but they mainly do kind of the highway, freeway type areas, right?
Yes. So UDOT, they have contracted people to pick up those state roads and highways.
Gotcha. And a lot of the ones that you're helping with are generally kind of city roads and parks and neighborhoods type of thing.
Right.
Okay. So what's kind of the most common species that you're removing as far as dead wildlife?
Well, it's probably 99% deer.
Okay.
At least, but once in a while, depending on the area, up certain areas you get in Park City we'll get a moose that has died, or in other areas maybe an elk that gets hit, but generally it's just deer that as the number one thing. We don't really pick up like raccoons and skunks and that sort of thing off the roads, just mainly the big game animals like deer, elk, and moose, and even cougar and bear if they get hit too.
Gotcha. Some of the bigger stuff that could kind of prove a safety hazard or something like that if they're left in an area.
Yeah.
I see. And what would you say is the most difficult roadkill to remove, and why?
Well, usually it's the most difficult are the larger ones like elk and moose just because of their size, but also you get a lot of deer that are behind houses in difficult areas to get to, whether they're down in a ravine between houses, or they get hung up on a fence, or just the logistics of the yard. It's a multi-tiered yard. So there's just a lot of different areas they can be in, and that's probably the most difficult part of it, is just dragging them that distance and just being able to get them off the fence and all that kind of.
Right. Typically, how heavy are the deer that this is a manual job. I've been watching you guys drag them, and I was going to help with one, and then it was too gross, so I did not. But how heavy typically are these deer that you're removing?
Well, sometimes we get fawns or younger deer, which aren't too bad. You get anywhere from 20 pounds to over 200 pounds.
Gotcha.
And some of these big bucks will weigh over 200 pounds. A lot of these does 150 pounds to 200, depending on time of year and the age of the animal and everything. But they're pretty heavy most of the time. Right.
And so you're typically, because of their weight and just kind of the logistics of moving them, you're typically dragging them rather than like trying to pick them up and carry them.
Yeah, we have equipment that we try to use to get them in the truck if they're too big. We have a winch that we use to haul them up in, but logistically it's hard. You can't really use a winch a lot of the times. It's in a backyard through gates and everything, so you have to physically drag these deer. There's really no getting around that.
Sure. And it can be pretty taxing physically. You said that it's kind of done a number on you as well, right?
Yeah, it can be physically demanding just because you're doing it all day long, and it's not good for the back and
right
and everything like that. But like I say, that's why we have equipment like winches and everything else to try to minimize that damage to your body.
And the last one we did, it feels kind of dangerous too. I had mentioned this because we were right off of a busy highway, and you had to drag the deer across the road and then pull it up with the winch. So there are some safety concerns as well, right?
Yeah, if we have to get them along a highway, like I said, UDOT, they have contractors that do most highways. There's some highways that we do, but there are some areas where the speed limit's pretty fast, and it is dangerous being on the side of the road, and we do have caution lights that we use, and we try to be as safe as we can, but but that can also be a dangerous part of the job, is just watching out for traffic.
Sure.
And even on a road that there's not a lot of speed, but there's a lot of cars, you just have to keep your eye out that way. So that makes it a little more difficult too.
Yeah, totally. There's a lot of factors that I wouldn't have ever thought about going into this, just, yeah, like you said, some of those logistics of even being able to find the deer. It took us a minute to locate that last one just because the directions weren't very good and we're driving around scouting for deer on the side of the road. So there are kind of a lot of things that play into it that most people wouldn't think about. And so what do we do with the roadkill? This is kind of a question that's come up, when we're removing these or we're having to take care of injured animals that have to be put down. Typically, what do we do with those animals?
Typically, most of them just there's a transfer station in Springville, the ones that I pick up, and I take them to that transfer station, which is basically the dump where all the garbage goes, and then they transfer that to the landfill. But we take them to that and dump them. Some people want to eat the deer, and we've had people ask, and typically we don't donate a roadkill just because of the condition they're in.
Sure.
And other factors. So
right.
That's not something that we typically do.
Right. Yeah, most of the time, by the time we're getting them reported to us and picking them up, they're pretty gross. Yeah, there's maggots. They're not safe for human consumption, for sure. I just learned this recently, that we sometimes will donate some that are in better condition to Hogle Zoo for their lions and stuff to feed on, right?
We have in the past, yes, if they want one. And any deer we donate, we give them a donation slip that allows them to have that deer legally. Even the ones we donate, like that to Hogle Zoo, it's not the majority, and it's once in a great while we do, yeah.
Sure, that they have to be in pretty good condition for the animals up there. I thought that was kind of cool, though, that when possible, we are trying to utilize these resources, and so they can be used if possible. And one thing I wanted to note that you had kind of told me about as well is sometimes if people find a dead deer or elk or whatever, they'll want to keep it for the antlers, but we actually don't allow them to take the antlers, right?
Right. It's illegal to take antlers off a deer, and so anytime we do get a deer, whether people want it or not, we have to cut the antlers off the deer, and those antlers are taken up to Salt Lake, and they have an auction on those antlers that they do all the time with antlers that they have from poached animals and from animals, the antlers that we grab.
Gotcha. And that money typically will just go back towards conservation projects and different things. I think I've talked to law enforcement about that, and they'd mentioned that. All in all, what would you say for you is kind of the hardest thing about this job?
Obviously, the logistics of getting a deer from behind a house sometimes it can be easy, and other times it can be hard depending on the weight of the deer or where it's at. And also just the driving and the safety that incurs with that, and being on the side of roads where there's a lot of traffic.
I was going to say, for me, I feel like just from my limited experience today, and let me preface this and give the disclaimer, I'm super pregnant. I'm almost 8 months pregnant, but the smell was pretty bad. We're recording this in the end of October, so it's not even the heat of the summer where it's really bad, but I totally did dry heave, I have to admit, and so I feel like the smell would just be pretty terrible. But you'd mentioned you kind of just get used to it, and it doesn't bother you after a while.
I guess I should say you never get used to it, but it's just, I don't know.
But you've never puked on the
No,
job? Yeah.
Never have. I just do it, I have a pretty strong stomach, though.
Sure.
So.
I mean, like I said, the pregnancy factor didn't help, but I do not have a strong stomach, so I give you guys kudos because I could not do it. Just between seeing some of the gross when it's kind of decaying and there's maggots and hairs falling off and stuff, and the smell, I'm feeling a little queasy still. I told these guys I might not be able to eat lunch today. What would you say is kind of the busiest month for you? When do you see the most number of dead animals from vehicle collisions and other things?
Usually it's in November.
Okay.
I would attribute that to the rut when it's the breeding season and the males are out breeding. They just move around a lot to find the females, and so they're all over the place, and so we get a lot in November. Our average deer that we pick up a month, I would say is around 200 a month, just on average.
Sure.
Some months are higher, some months are a little lower. But in November, we've had almost as high as 400 deer in November.
Yeah, that's wild. And that's just for your part of the state.
What I'm talking about is just basically the Wasatch Front, Utah County and Salt Lake County, Summit County and Wasatch County, kind of.
Right. And you probably do see the most just because we have the most people here along the Wasatch Front, too. And I talked to our migration coordinator, and he said, yeah, the rut, they're moving a lot, and a lot of them are starting to migrate into lower elevation for their winter feeding grounds. And so, yeah, they're just really active, moving all over the place, and people aren't always thinking to look for them, And he mentioned, too, the days are shorter now. We're going into winter, so there's less daylight. It's harder to see, lower visibility. I feel like that totally makes sense as kind of why this is the time of year. You've been at this for, several years, and you've had a long career with the division as well. What would you say is one of your most memorable experiences that you've had in, picking up dead roadkill? You've got some good stories.
I had one up at the University of Utah this last year where I was trying to find a deer at an intersection, and it was a pretty busy intersection, so I pulled over into the parking lot so I could get out of the truck and just go on foot and kind of look at it so I'd kind of know where it was because I couldn't find it from driving. And a young girl pulled up and asked me if I was looking for a deer, and I said yeah. I told her to pull in the parking lot because she was kind of blocking traffic, and she got out and she said that it was in her trunk.
Oh my gosh.
She opened the trunk and she had the dead deer there, and she was going to take it home and eat it. But I told her that you can't do that, for one thing. And another thing, the deer smelled pretty bad. It was pretty rotten, and I don't even know why she wanted it in the first place. I get it. She might have thought it was good to eat, but
it's so
I
gross.
just thought that was kind of a different experience.
Yeah.
So I was just amazed that she was able to even get it in her trunk because she was a pretty petite girl.
Right. That is pretty impressive. She's over manhandling it, putting it in the back of her trunk, take home for dinner. Yeah, that's a good story because that is kind of unexpected for sure. So we also wanted to include, just as people are listening to this, obviously, like we mentioned, is kind of a high time of year to hit deer. We're always doing what we can to try and decrease some of these collisions, and our biologists have put in different road, crossings and bridges and underpasses and things for wildlife to kind of eliminate some of those vehicle deer collisions. But we did want to mention, there's some tips for people as well as you're driving, and these animals are the most active at dusk and dawn. So, it's a good thing to be alert during those times when you're driving, and just be aware that deer, elk, other big game are migrating this time of year. So, pay attention to any of those wildlife crossing signs, because those are usually put in an area that have kind of a high number of these collisions. And just make sure you're kind of scanning both sides of the road. Make sure you're looking for them, you're not driving distracted. And, when possible, it's a good idea to use kind of your brights, what we call them high beam headlights, so that you can better see some of these animals. And one of the tips that we recommend is looking for their eye shine, because you can kind of see that from a ways away. So that'll kind of help alert you, oh, there's an animal. You'll see that sometimes before you'll see the deer, especially if it's kind of dark. Make sure you're just driving kind of slow in some of these areas. And then one of the tips that we offer that I thought was kind of interesting was, and it's obviously illegal to litter, and there's penalties for that as well, but that can also attract more animals to the road, which I hadn't really thought about that until recently, that sometimes that can be a food source for them, for different types of animals that can draw them to roadways. So that's one thing to keep an eye out for. Do you have any other tips as far as what people should do, like if they do hit a deer? What do you kind of recommend, Steve?
Generally, I would, what you said as far as just being alert. There are usually deer signs on areas where there's a lot of deer. Be alert. And it's funny, most deer that are hit, there's certain roads where they're hit quite a bit because it's a migration area where deer are going back and forth, and it's generally the locals that are hitting them, and they know they're there. So
they're just not paying attention.
Well, yeah, because they're the majority of the drivers in that area, and they know the deer's there because they see them dead on the side of the road too, and the
Gotcha.
Deer signs. And I would just say to them, when you're in those areas, just slow down a little more maybe, and and just pay attention. And if you do see one in the middle of the road, don't swerve to miss it, because then you can swerve on to incoming traffic,
Yeah.
and that can be more dangerous, or even roll your vehicle. So
That's true.
I'm not saying to hit the deer, but if you have to hit it, most of the time it's better than,
A safer option.
you know, slow down as much as you can and hit it, or swerve to the shoulder or somewhere you can get out.
Right.
But yeah, if they do hit one, I mean, obviously most people, I think, would call the police if they had damaged their vehicle for an accident, you know, and they usually drag that to the side of the road, the deer. So, and some deer will get hit and then run off somewhere and then die or something.
Sure. And those are some of the difficult ones that you have to go track down later or get to
Yeah, I
out
mean,
of a
someone
backyard.
will find one in their backyard. Sometimes that just died of natural causes, ate something bad, or just had a hard time, and other times they get hit and then they run. You know, they'll try to find a secluded place if they don't feel good. So
Sure. Well, you do have a very unique job, so I appreciate you letting me tag along today. I have a lot more respect, like I said, for what you guys do, because it is pretty difficult and very smelly. So
yeah, and I would just also add that this list we get, I mean, we pick up a lot of deer, and, you know, we tell people within 3 days or whatever. We try to get them within 1 day if we can, but be patient with us. If we miss one, then sometimes the address isn't as good. We can't find it. You could call again, or we'll get another call on it, but we try to do our best to clean them up as much as we can and as fast as we can.
yeah, that is a great tip. And I mean, like you mentioned, you guys are covering a huge amount of area, coming to these different reports of injured deer or dead deer, and so yeah, that is a good tip. Is just be patient, report it again if it's still there. And these guys, they're good at what they do. Like I said, I've been impressed tagging along with them this morning. So I appreciate you letting me come out and kind of
No problem.
introduce our
You
listeners
can come out anytime to help us drag deer.
All right. I know. Hopefully I'll be more help next time and won't be dry heaving in the corner the whole time. As always, we'd love if you guys could subscribe to the Wild Podcast. We release a new episode on the third Tuesday of each month. And so we hope that you'll join us next month for some more wildlife stories.